Welcome back inside the secret Gibby headquarters for a freezing cold edition of Gibby's Football Podcast. I am your host, of course, Zach McGibbon. It is really cold here in Belleville. We have an extreme cold warning in effect. I assume it's the same over the location where this man is in. Of course, he is the executive producer for life on the This Is Wrestling podcast, the other podcast I do. He keeps me in line. He texts me Hulk Hogan pictures and gifs every single day. That, of course, is my man, Steve Bunda. Bunda, how are you doing today, buddy?
Friggin'! Thanks for having me back on Chris Holsky's show, which is, I believe, F, the shipman, because with Swoggle. But yeah, thanks for having me back on. And I know it is cold. We have a cold warning as well right now in Ottawa, but I'm ready to be warmed up by your hot takes.
That's right.
Friggin'.
That's
Let's
right.
Go.
I
How
love
you doing?
it. I'm doing pretty good. Yeah, I was trying to avoid saying freezing cold takes because there are no freezing cold takes on this show. Don't go back into the episode archives and find stuff where I was wrong. If anything, there's been a lot more that I've been right on than wrong on, including predicting the Denver Broncos not making the playoffs. You can ignore the reasons why I said that, but nonetheless, the prediction still stands. But yes, it is cold here. I believe last I checked, when I check on the Belleville weather site, we are approaching minus 34 with a wind chill. So it is cold. It is really cold in our area. So staying warm, and best way to stay warm, of course, is a cold glass of water that I have beside me to keep my voice in tip-top shape throughout this show. But it was funny, we were talking earlier, and you mentioned how you are getting your votes underway for This Is Wrestling, for the Best Sports Podcast and Faces Magazine, the 2023 Ottawa Awards. I know you've been voting every single day, Bunda.
Yeah, and I know that this is a podcast, so people can't see, but I am standing up right now doing my Teddy Long, my Theodore Long dance moves, because as the executive producer for life of This Is Wrestling, not only am I constantly working on making the show better and making things easier for you, but I'm also making sure that we win awards.
That's right.
I can't just be the only winner because of my executive producer for life title. I need to keep working at it. You know, people that just try and win awards and then walk away and think that's all, that's not me. I'm taking This Is Wrestling to the next level.
I love it. I love it. And we all have to get awards. I mean, I am currently awardless. I believe our executive director, Sam Pope, is also awardless, also the general manager of this show, constantly demanding Broncos segments on this show. So we're trying to go out there and win it. We're trying to go out there and win it all on the This
You said Sam's a Broncos fan. I don't think that's true.
Oh, is she also a Bucs fan?
He's a Bucs fan, yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize that. You couldn't tell by the amount of times I've been requested to put on Denver Broncos segments on this show, whether it be through angry text messages or angry tweets directed at me, or really just any sort of way that can be communicated via text message. It's communicated my way that there needs to be more Denver Broncos segments on this show.
Yeah, it's a good way to hide things, eh? Don't worry. We all know who are the big Bucs fans. You, me, Sam Pope, just about everybody.
That's right. Exactly. Well, since we're both big Bucs fans here, Bunda, I feel it's appropriate that we start off this show with something that I think maybe relates more to you than me. I mean, you're probably a bigger Bucs fan than I am. But Tom Brady announcing his retirement from the NFL. It sounds very similar, doesn't it? Exactly 1 year ago, he made the same decision, also as a member of the Buccaneers. And but hey, he says it's for realsies this time. It's good. He's done. He's done everything he's needed to do in his career. Tom Brady no longer in the NFL. Let the record state that the Dallas Cowboys beat Tom Brady into retirement. I would like to put that on record right now. But nonetheless, it's a lot can be said about Tom Brady in terms of his career. You look at the multiple passing records, the longevity of his career, how long he's just been able to stay at worst a top 10 quarterback throughout his entirety of his career. The GOAT, as some will call him, leaving the NFL. The floor is yours, Bunda, to talk about how great Tom Brady is and how he helped lead your Bucs to prominence.
Yeah, I think it goes without saying that he is the GOAT. I don't know. Would you have another argument for greatest of all time, friggin' McGibbon?
I was always a Peyton Manning guy. He was, in terms of like just peak on the field, I always was more impressed with Manning than Brady. I know. This kind of show kind of gets some people certain opinions on the show, but First Take had an interesting episode with sports radio legends Mike Francesa and Mad Dog Chris Russo, and Francesa really put it best, where he believed that Manning was the greatest regular season player he ever saw. Joe Montana was the best postseason quarterback he ever saw. But in terms of being able to play at such a high level for so long, Tom Brady absolutely is the greatest quarterback he's ever seen. So I guess from that standpoint, like I've when just kind of getting in the NFL, I was way more impressed with Peyton and how he commanded the field and whatever. And I never really saw the technical ability. Omaha, exactly. That's right. Now the name of his production company, right? I was more impressed with Peyton, and Brady certainly didn't have the technical ability like a Dan Marino that could throw the ball with such precision. But I think the thing to respect about Brady is he was definitely of those a way more intense competitor than all of them, and I think that's what made him stand out and what gives him that extra edge over a lot of those quarterbacks. Obviously, winning seven Super Bowls helps, and a bunch of MVP titles. And again, I don't want to make it seem like I think Brady is undeserving of any of the accolades or anything like that. It's just in terms of like the peak quarterback I ever saw, I wouldn't put Brady in there. I'd probably say Peyton Manning was the best quarterback I ever see play live. Obviously, never had the chance to see like a Roger Staubach or a Joe Namath or even like a Troy. You'll laugh at the Cowboys names, but the Troy Aikmans as well, Steve Youngs. But just kind of going back and seeing film and seeing them live, I would have to say Peyton Manning. But I'm what do you think in terms of like best peak quarterback you've ever seen?
It's tough, man. And I look at the situation as I was always that way of thinking. I always thought Joe Montana was the best. And I look at it in a situation of winning and how he went to 5 Super Bowls. He won all 5. Mm-hmm. Tom won a 6th, and I was still like, yeah, okay. But when he went to the Bucs, even as a Bucs fan, I was skeptical. It was exciting to have Tom Brady because, hey, you've got Tom Brady going to make the Buccaneers a known franchise. Yep. Where you ask, I don't know, 80% of football fans, they're like, we're the Bucs. Like, nobody remembered since their 2003 Super Bowl. So I look at it in a sense of when he went to the Bucs and he still put up big numbers, but winning the Super Bowl in that first year with the Bucs on COVID season where he didn't have a full training camp, he had to, practice in parks where he's getting yelled at by Florida police and he's getting kicked out of parks and he's coming to a new team. And it's such a intense winning that Super Bowl at Raymond James in Tampa. And then the way he finished off, even how bad his record was this year, he still finished second in the league with passing yards. So my opinions changed not only because I'm a Bucs fan and he won us a Super Bowl, but at the same time is just I've altered my view on him because he has legit every record you can imagine in terms of on the field stuff. Super Bowls, he has more Super Bowls than any one team has, which is ridiculous. Yep. Having 7 rather than 6, which is the next team. And just always, he's never really dropped off. And his last game as a Patriot where he throws the interception to the Titans, and I believe it was Logan Ryan who played on the Bucs this past year who intercepted him for a pick 6. And it was like, all right, that's his last pass as a New England Patriot. It's like he was washed. He's never going to do anything. The fact that the guy is 45 years old and is second in passing yards. We looked at Joe Montana. We brought him up when he was then, I believe, went to the Kansas City Chiefs. He was a shell of himself. There was nothing. He was a contract to sign and kind of ride off into the sunset. At the same time, you look at Tom Brady, this guy continued to take less money with the Bucs and continued to win and do good. They won the NFC. This year was a bad year, and I do chalk a lot of it up to coaching and play calling. And Brady not returning makes a lot of sense because he just went through a year where, play calling wasn't great, but here, we're going to bring in a new play caller. We're going to bring in a new offensive coordinator, and you're going to have to learn all this stuff. But at the same time, the Buccaneers, as of today, are $50 million over the cap. As a Cowboys fan or a Saints fan or I believe the Rams are also over the cap. Eagles fans, they all know that because it happens almost every year. They just keep kicking the can down the road. You're 50 and 60. I believe last year the Saints were like $80 million with the cap. Not that hard in the NFL because of loopholes to get under the cap. But Tom Brady sitting there realizing, you know what? I lost my center day one of training camp this year. My left guard last year retired, like right around now. They're $50 million over the cap. To get under the cap, you're going to have to do a lot of maneuvering, but you just don't have that extra ability to then go out and shop for Tom Brady. You don't have that ability to go grab another offensive lineman or another defensive piece or a big prize free agent like they did when he signed there in Tampa back in 2020, because that was a year that they weren't over the cap. But what they've done since winning the Super Bowl is kick the can down the road. So I believe Tom Brady looked at it and the Buccaneers said, look, you come back, we're going to look at a situation where you're $50 million over the cap. We still have, Mike Evans, and we still have Chris Godwin, and we still have a couple like Rashad White. We still have, technically they still have Leonard Fournette, but I'm going to assume he gets cut because of them being so high over the cap. I think Tom Brady looked at this as a businessman and said, you know what? I'm going to be 46 by the time I take my next snap. And I don't want to be in a situation where I'm learning a new offense. Then I'm also behind the eight ball in terms of like talent and things around me. Jeff Darlington of ESPN had it out there that it was either Bucks or retirement. And this guy just went through a whole hell of a year, seeing the fact that, he retired, came back after 40 days. Then he played this year. Then while he was in training camp, Giselle divorces him or hits him with a divorce in the middle of training camp. He disappears for 11 days. His head was never on right. The play calling was terrible. There was a lot of injuries to the offensive line. It was kind of like, you know what? Do you want to take that chance to come back again? I do believe he should have retired at the end of the Super Bowl when they won that in Tampa. I don't know about you, but it's what I believe should have happened. This is a long-winded rant answer here, but I'm almost done it. I promise you, friggin'. But I believe he should have retired there. But what bothered him was Drew Brees still had the passing yard stat. Well, he also has not beaten the New England Patriots. There was a couple other stats that I'm sure he wanted to get that he has over the last two seasons. But I think that still drove him to want to play another year. And that's what brought him back after that Super Bowl. And the loss of the Rams obviously sucked in the divisional game 2 years ago, and it was intense. He almost made a huge comeback, but there was already that inkling that things were not looking so good in Tampa in terms of play calling with Byron Leftwich. He's no longer there now. But at the end of the day, I think he looked at the situation as, you know what, he came back this year to have that redemption shot because he had the sour taste in his mouth, losing to the Rams. They still have one more year. He's still looking good stats-wise. I wouldn't be surprised if Tom Brady came back and was still a top 5 quarterback in terms of some stats next year. I also think, though, he realizes he's always one hit away. 46 years old. How much do you want to get hit by these guys? So my long-winded answer comes short. I wasn't surprised when he retired. It's kind of like it makes sense. This guy just went through a crazy year. Let him do his thing. I'm upset because I feel like the Buccaneers are going to suck next year because they're going to pay off that Super Bowl credit card of $50 million over the cap. They're going to ride with Kyle Trask and probably end up getting Caleb Williams from USC. Let's hope. At the end of the day, the Bucs are just going to be another random team in the NFL now for the next, I don't know how many years until they're relevant again. But at the end of the day, you know what? I'll still call Tom Brady the GOAT because he's proven to me a lot since he became a Buccaneer that he still has a lot in the tank at the age of 45 years old, which I think is just remarkable itself.
Absolutely. I mean, hey, you'll still have that Super Bowl to hang on to, right? So can you really be disappointed? I mean, we saw how the Rams did this year, and it was certainly a significant drop-off, but hey, the year before they won a Super Bowl, so is it really that upsetting? But nonetheless, it was for me, just quickly, like, when it came to Brady's retirement, I was a little bit more surprised. I'm obviously not as close to the team and following it as you are, but I thought for sure that Brady was going to try one more team, maybe the Raiders, and try and get like one more good year in there. But as it was sort of laid out and the way that you explained it, and makes a lot more sense to me for him to retire. There was just a part of me that was like, man, I don't want to be burned again like I was last year when Brady came back. So, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. But
I would be legit shocked if he did come out of retirement again this year. I saw the Raiders. I think I saw there was a couple other reports, right? The Jets were another. The Jets actually wasn't so much of a that kind of didn't surprise me, but from a lot more detail came into, his family and his children. Everybody's on the East Coast. It didn't make any sense for him to go to the 49ers or a West Coast or Vegas team. Apparently, none of that kind of made sense for his lifestyle with his family and his kids being in Miami. He's got a son in New York. So it looked like it was going to be Bucks or nothing, according to Jeff Darlington and to a lot of other people that just said he never really considered. And I've always heard from the 49ers connection, because it was his favorite team growing up, that the 49ers were going to be a team that would pursue him and he would love to play for them. But he's always been very dismissive of that because he was still so sour. They passed over him on the draft multiple times that one year when he got drafted by the New England Patriots late in the 6th and 7th rounds. It's one of those situations where he's like, you know what, I don't want to play there. I'm not, like, it would be cool, but I believe that. So no, I would be shocked though, like on a scale 1 to 10, how shocked would friggin' McGibbon be if he came out of retirement? I would be at like a 14.
Really?
Like straight up. I don't know about you. I'd be at a 14.
With the way that he pulled the stunt last year, I wouldn't be as shocked. But the way that you explained it, I would be at like a 3. Now the way you explained it, I'd be more at like a 6. I'd be a little shocked, but nothing crazy. I know. It's like, hey, I doubled it. I doubled it from 3. But no, it's Brady. So who knows? Like, I don't know. It's given me some Brett Favre vibes. And so I don't know. Once the season starts, maybe that's when I'll believe it. But but for now, Tom Brady retired from the NFL. Still an incredible career, all things considered, and certainly going to be. I will miss booing him when he would beat the Cowboys many times. But nonetheless, Tom Brady.
Got the banner, though. You got the banner you can put up.
That's right.
Retired Tom Brady. He gave Cowboys fans one thing to celebrate.
That's right. Hang the banner. That's our Super Bowl.
It wasn't just a win. Like, the Bucs beat the Cowboys at the first game of the year, last 2 seasons in a row.
Yep.
But the Cowboys in the playoffs, when it mattered, absolutely buried Tom Brady and the Bucs.
We didn't even need our kicker for that game. We buried them so badly.
Shout out. Reb Maher, Reb Lex.
It's too bad he's not coming back to the team, but nonetheless. Let's move on quickly to some of the different coaching hires that took place in the NFL. A lot of big names hired, and speaking of those Cowboys, a name that was familiar on the offensive side of the ball leaving, going to the Chargers. Let's start with that before we go to the big name hires. Kellen Moore. Let go by the Dallas Cowboys. He was interviewed for the head coaching job in Carolina. And then he's got a couple other opportunities to be an offensive coordinator with other teams, including the Chargers. The Cowboys decided to let them go. And lo and behold, within 24 hours, Kellen Moore named the new offensive coordinator for the Chargers. I certainly have thoughts on this as someone that's obviously been watching Kellen Moore's play calling the last 4 years. He was in the offensive coordinator role. But your initial thoughts on this move when you first heard it in terms of Kellen Moore going to the LA Chargers?
Yeah, it was shocking too, because I believe the Chargers were tied, but the initial report was that the Buccaneers were to have a lot of interest in him, and they've been interviewing our offensive coordinators the last week or so. I think they're up to 7 now. But their lead kind of guy has always been Todd Monken, the offensive coordinator at Georgia. He once was the offensive coordinator for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So that was kind of surprising when I saw how quickly the Kellen Moore situation came out, because it said that he was separating ways and that the Bucs have heavy interest. And I was like, okay. And then I saw and read more, and apparently it was between the Bucs and the Chargers. But how quickly he went to the Chargers, I was more shocked that the Cowboys were unpleased with and would want him to kind of part ways. I'm assuming this is more on the Kellen Moore side. From what I've been kind of internet sleuthing about, is that it seems like Kellen Moore was being undermined and overpowered by Mr. McCarthy, the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys a lot, who was once a play caller and was notoriously known for clock management, terrible play calls and all that. Kellen Moore has been a guy that, you go back to his football career. He went from a backup, I believe, then retired and became an offensive coordinator within like 1 year.
Yep.
but has always had that creativity in play calling. And if I look at the Dallas Cowboys offense, I don't put a lot of it on play calling. I put a lot of it on talent. Maybe some of the run designs weren't the best. I believe that giving the ball for Zeke up the middle was not very much liked by a lot of Cowboys fans. I see your eyes getting crazy right now. So for me to see that, it was very interesting to see how quickly it happened. But for me, I don't see it as it's a no-brainer for him to go to the Chargers. Having a young guy like Herbert there, that's a very attractive option. Very great running game with Eckler, but multiple receivers. The Chargers are a team that I think has underachieved so much. We talk about hurt fan bases. I'm sure Cowboys fans are one of them, but how cursed that Chargers team has been with the amount of talent they've had, and yet they just haven't been able to get over the hump. When you go back the last 20 years, the amount of talent they've had, I'm curious to see how now this can help, because I believe that team is a Super Bowl bound. Crazy division, so it's hard to win in that division. At the end of the day, though, I'm curious to see how this would go and if it's going to be a good fit. But everything I've read, everything I've seen from Kellen Moore, seems like he's a great offensive coordinator. So I'm a little suspicious as why the Cowboys were so easy to let him go.
Yeah, so as somebody that had obviously got to see a whole bunch of Kellen Moore play calls and whatever, I never really saw him as a great offensive coordinator. I always saw him as a decent to good offensive coordinator. He was certainly better than Scott Linehan, who was the previous offensive coordinator for the Cowboys. A significant upgrade. But in terms of Moore, the thing with Moore is that he could have some really bad play designs. You mentioned the Ezekiel Elliott running up the middle all the time, which brought back some chaotic thoughts in my head. But also...
where was a joke.
But also, not even just on the run plays, the amount of times I had to see all four receivers on the field run curl routes was going to make me lose my mind. So it's not all of his play designs have been great. He's always been hot and cold when it comes to his play calls, and I think that was also evident as well. I know, McCarthy certainly has a role in that, but there's been a lot of times in 2-minute situations where some of the play calls have not been up to snuff. And so I think in the case of the Chargers, this is an upgrade for them at offensive coordinator. People talk about how this is going to help Herbert. I think Austin Eckler could go off this year the way that Kellen Moore, looks at his running backs, and get used to the jumbo packages in LA as well, with multiple offensive linemen, some being used as fullbacks as well for their running plays. But this is an upgrade for the Chargers. Definitely an upgrade over Lombardi, Joe Lombardi. But I wouldn't say he's a great offensive coordinator. I think he definitely has his moments where he's a very keen play caller. I think we saw in the Bucs game, that was probably one of the better games he called as an offensive play caller. But there are also other moments where he just really the offense stalls, and some of that does have to do with play calling. And I agree with you, in terms of the talent wise, especially at the receiver position for the Dallas Cowboys is pretty lacking. And so there's not much you could do when the receiver talent that you have is limited, when you really only have CeeDee Lamb and Gallup's all right, and Noah Brown is okay, and you got an aging T.Y. Hilton. It's not the greatest combination of receivers that we've ever had. But in the case of the Chargers, I think this will be an upgrade. It's just you just hope that the charging doesn't continue on with 2-minute drills and all that when it comes to Kellen Moore. Another move I want to talk about quickly before we get to the head coaching roles, and this is a move I think has been going under the radar a little bit. I don't know if you agree with me on that, but I think this is a great move for the Dolphins. Vic Fangio being hired as the defensive coordinator for the team on a 3-year deal. This was one of the weakest parts of the team, the Dolphins, this past season. After that explosive offense, and yes, they have some very good players on that defense, don't get me wrong, but nothing really came together for them to be a really, really strong defense. I think Vic Fangio could really change that around for this Dolphins squad, and this could be a team to really look out for. Your thoughts on the Fangio hiring?
Yeah, it was interesting because it looked like there was a pretty good bidding war going on for Vic Fangio, and there was a lot of rumors and teams attached to him. And I think the one intriguing one was the San Francisco 49ers, because the 49ers, we'll get to later, but DeMeco Ryans now being the head coach of the Texans. And I thought, that's a team that could probably use something like that to stay relevant. Yeah, I'm not saying they're going to be non-relevant next year, but they've lost Robert Saleh a couple of years ago now, D'Amico Ryans. They're losing a lot of coaching options that they've had. So it's just kind of interesting to see how they go through that. But that's a team, too, that has a lot of unfinished business. And I could see them being very aggressive. I believe once it was announced that he was going to Miami, even the Carolina Panthers kind of swooped in and tried to steal him as well. And it was like, what the heck is going on here? It's kind of interesting. But for the Dolphins, like you said, I believe that what we saw from their offense and from their team this year, you can chalk a lot of it up to maybe the defense wasn't that great, but I thought the defense was pretty decent at times. They got a lot of pieces there that they can build on. But I also look at the injuries to Tua Tagovailoa that hurt them a lot this year. And at times, I think that if Tua Tagovailoa, who I believe just cleared concussion protocol last year, I don't know if he is the man to lead that team to the promised land. He had some good stats and some big games when it mattered, but I do put a lot of that with, the coaching staff and his relationship with McDaniels. I thought they got along great. I thought that was a very good, relationship, and I was really excited to see the Dolphins kind of be a lot more prominent this year. But I look at that situation with him and adding Vic Fangio, and that's going to be very good for that team. I believe the defense will be great. But my only question mark now, because I wasn't really worried about the defense, my only question mark now is, how is this offense going to run, and is Tua Tagovailoa going to be able to be that guy for the future? Because he's shown signs of it, but then the concussion, the injuries, that's something that kind of really is a huge red flag this year. So I'm curious if they want to stick with Tua Tagovailoa. At the end of the day, though, that defense is going to be serious next year. And Vic Fangio, like I said, I just thought it was interesting that he had so many people kind of pulling for him. Not that he, shouldn't, but how I believe when the rumor came out he was going to sign with the Dolphins, that 3 teams swooped in and were trying to get him to kind of outbid them at that time.
Mm-hmm. Totally. I think in terms of the way that offenses are now, you want to try and find that defensive-minded guru that could try and counter some of the big offenses, and Fangio has shown that in years past. I know he didn't have the most successful stint in Denver as a head coach, but those Denver defenses were still pretty solid. And so if you could try and find that defensive guru to stop these new creative offenses that are coming into the NFL, I think that could be highly enticing for some teams. And in the case of the Dolphins, where, I've been somebody that's been on the Dolphins bandwagon. I think there's a lot of great pieces there, and I think they've got some great tools to really develop into something. And I think adding Fangio in there, and again, there are pieces on that Dolphins defense. I think of Christian Wilkins off the top of my head. That's a great player there. But this could
Holland, Canadian.
Of course, Javon Holland, a good Canadian kid playing on that team as well. So there are pieces there. It's now that they've got a very well defensive-minded coach in there, I think this could be a really good team. As you mentioned, it really does go back to Tua Tagovailoa, and in terms of how he can handle some of the concussion issues. And as you mentioned, that is a big red flag. Do you look to a quarterback to try and develop, or even try and find, a solidified quarterback, can get the job done right away? Because they certainly have the pieces in there. It's just trying to put it all together to make a run. Vic Fangio being named defensive coordinator for the Dolphins. Let's look at the big head coaching hires. We'll start with the biggest one, Sean Payton. Back in the NFL. It took an arm and a leg to get him, but the Denver Broncos were able to get Sean Payton on their staff. They are going all in. They're giving up all the picks to run with Russell Wilson and Sean Payton for the next couple of years. As part of the deal, the New Orleans will receive a 2023 first-round draft pick and a second-round pick next year, while Denver will also receive a third-round draft pick as part of the deal with Sean Payton. What do you make of this move, Bunda? Do you think Payton can adapt well? I know he's only been gone a year, but the NFL could change rapidly. Do you think Payton will be able to fit in to the modern-day game of the NFL?
I hope not, because I really don't like Sean Payton and because of his ties to the Saints. But if you're the Broncos, you're really this is your last big kind of hurrah with this group, because you look at what they gave up to get Russell Wilson. And now what you're giving up to get Sean Payton, when Russell Wilson was that one piece they were missing, right? A quarterback. That's the one thing that John Elway and that Broncos team has struggled, is to get a quarterback since Peyton Manning retired. They've had like 47 different quarterbacks, I'm pretty sure, take a snap. I think you were in that mix as well.
Yeah, I was on the practice squad, yeah.
Let me just look it up. Yeah, you were back there in 2019. Makes sense. But at the end of the day, it's like, all right, you brought Russell Wilson in, and again, they had some tough injuries at running back. Losing Javonte Williams early in the year, that hurt them a lot. But at the end of the day, they had Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton. They have a lot of receivers here that are great. Latavius Murray still was pretty good. Chase Edmonds is there. Their offensive line wasn't terrible, but again, lost to injury as well. Like they're a team that has so much on offense and so much talent, and the defense was unreal. But you look at some of the guys like KJ Hamler, Marlon Mack that they brought in, Mike Boone. You go through a couple of other guys as well, but it just, I can go down the list of why they weren't that great. But at the end of the day, this is a team that needs to take that step forward, and they bought in so much now. If there's anyone, and I don't know if it's Russell Wilson, the player, or if it's Russell Wilson, the person that has really drove things wrong, because you hear a lot of weird stories like him doing lunges on the plane and ticking off players as they're going over to play in London or wherever they went to play, and how weird he is, how he's not giving out his cell phone number to players. They have to go through his representatives to get a hold of him if they want to talk to him. So imagine you're Jerry Jeudy, who he did come to the defense of Russell Wilson, I believe, on Twitter, and said, everyone back off. He's my quarterback. He does good. He prepares well. I get that. But at the end of the day, why are all these stories coming out? It just kind of surprises me a little bit. The other thing I'm curious to see is the offensive line and how it can hold up next year. They had some injuries there at times. Lloyd Cushenberry injured, a couple others as well that were very tough for them to deal with. But I'm curious to see how much Sean Payton can bring that creative offense, because we saw with the Saints with Drew Brees where they were so good at using the running back. Javonte Williams there being a young running back coming off an injury, but how can you use him? How can you use Latavius Murray? And Chase Edmonds is another running back that I believe that they'll love because he's so good out of the backfield. Mm-hmm. But when we look at the situation, it's about kind of, can Russell Wilson get it together? And can he use his weapons? Because that defense is unreal. Like that defense we've already seen. I think Pat Surtain is the best corner in the league. Like he shut things down all the time. Alex Singleton, we saw him, former CFL, Calgary Stampeder, Eagle. Now he's there. He looked great at middle linebacker. And they don't have many draft picks to kind of help out this team anymore, since they gave him up a lot. They gave up a lot of draft picks over the last couple of seasons here now to get this team to just take that next step. So if it's not going to be Sean Payton, I'm going to be curious to see what happens next, because that team has paid Russell Wilson a lot of money. They have a lot of young players, and you're going to get to that window where you're going to have to start paying a lot of these young players out of the rookie deals, and you just can't keep everyone. So that's what I'm looking at. I'm curious to see. I think that this will be what helps that team in that division. It's a very tough division, but I think the Raiders are going to take a step back because I'm not quite sure what their answer is going to be at quarterback. The Chiefs are always going to be there. And the Chargers, well, I think they're going to be a team that now with their offensive coordinator, Kellen Moore, I think they're going to be very tough in that division as well. So the Broncos, like this was their Hail Mary. I'm just curious if anyone can catch the ball. I think it'll help, though. I do.
Yeah, me too. I think in terms of the way Hackett coach, I was like, week one, I was like, oh, he's not the guy. Like, he is absolutely not the guy.
That week one game where everyone was like, what are you doing?
Yeah, exactly.
What he's doing, yeah.
Yeah, it was rough after that. And so, yeah, I think you'll see some improvements. They certainly are hitching a lot on this duo of Russell Wilson and Sean Payton. I don't know if... I understand, coaches not necessarily being your first or second choice. It's competitive in the NFL. But Sean Payton being your third choice and you're giving up a first and a second to try and get him, and he's not your first choice, is a little concerning for me. It almost comes across as desperate to me. But I guess it's one way to try and salvage this Russell Wilson contract and see what they still got. And as you mentioned, there is talent there, and a receiver that is coming back for them, Tim Patrick, who's, I believe, tore his ACL during training camp. So that's another receiving option for them there. So they're going to get some talented players back. I guess we'll see how they do draft-wise. As you mentioned, not a lot of picks to work with. But as we've learned with some other teams, hey, maybe they could just spend away not only just draft picks, but hey, let's just go out and get some free agents. I mean, you look at some of the teams, as you mentioned, the Saints and the Cowboys and the Eagles, and the cap space doesn't exist. The cap does not exist in their mind. So maybe Denver adapts that mindset to try and work around some stuff. But it'll be interesting to see how Payton kind of uses that, utilizes the offense and tries to find different creative ways, as you mentioned, with the Javonte Williams and a Chase Edmonds in the backfield as well. And trying to find some life in Russell Wilson and get him going. But it's a big risk for the Denver Broncos that they're taking. Hopefully Sam Pope doesn't get too mad at us for this segment. But nonetheless, the other head coaching hiring, which was interesting to hear how people were actually very complimentary of this role, considering some of the craziness that's happened with his organization the last couple of years. But the Houston Texans bringing back DeMeco Ryans, a bit of a homecoming for him, the former linebacker for the Texans, now being named the head coach of this squad. The third head coach in the last 3 years for the Texans, but they're committing to Ryans long term on this. And it was interesting to hear in the process, a lot of teams, a lot of candidates, I should say, found the Texans job very enticing, because essentially it is, you're working from square one. You get to make a whole bunch of decisions, and you get to make the decision on the quarterback of the future for the Texans. So, and plus, Jack Easterby not there anymore, and I think that's was a big hindrance for this Texan squad. And so, looking at all that, DeMeco Ryans, big homecoming for him with the Texans, going again with a defensive-minded coach. Your thoughts on this move?
Yeah, I mean, I just hope he can get through a year. They gave him a 6-year deal, so I believe so. I do feel terrible for guys like Lovie Smith, and the name is escaping me, of the coach that was there 2 years ago. That was only there for the 1 year, but being lame ducks in a situation where things just gone downhill ever since the Deshaun Watson issues that they had to deal with, and then trading him away. It just doesn't seem like there was a lot there to work with. And what were your expectations, and how were they anything more than what they've been the last couple of years? Davis Mills at times has surprised me. I don't think he is a terrible quarterback. I think of him more as probably a solid number 2. So that's going to be my big thing is, okay, how do they deal with that? They do have some pieces that build around. John Mechie, the third Canadian, played at Alabama, dealing with leukemia and cancer, sat out the whole year. But the reports are that he should be able to play this year. And I know that's one thing you want to hope for, because he's got a lot of talent. At the same time, you just want him to be healthy. But there's pieces there. Like, that's a receiver you could try and build around. Damian Pierce looked really good on offense. Defensively, I'm curious to see what you could do there, because that's where I feel like there is a lot of missing pieces. Like Derek Stingley Jr. was okay. Jalen Petra, I thought, had a very underrated season. But other than that, you're looking at almost, a couple random guys. Malik Collins, okay. Jerry Hughes is there. A couple of younger guys as well. But I'm curious to see what he could do in this 6-year contract. Everything I've read and heard from 49ers fans, from even the players sticking up for him, all the insiders saying everybody loves DeMeco Ryans. He's the guy you want to be around. There's even reports and rumors that he's trying to persuade J.J. Watt to join his coaching staff, which would be very interesting and very cool for Texans fans, as he just announced his retirement as well with Tom Brady. 2028, it's going to be one heck of a year for the NFL Hall of Fame induction class, especially if a couple other people, say Aaron Rodgers or anyone else, joins it. But at the end of the day, when I look at the situation here, I think the Texans are in a spot now where, all right, let your head coach do this. Let your head coach have a couple years to work out. Everybody seems to love DeMeco Ryans, so let's see it happen here now. The other thing, too, is DeMeco Ryans hasn't been a coordinator for long. He just joined that San Francisco 49ers staff, I believe, in 2017. He's still relatively fresh, and to jump right to a head coaching position is very, I'm curious to see how he adapts to that, and who he hires for a lot of his offensive coaching staff, and how he rounds out his coaching staff in general.
100%. It'll be an interesting team to kind of take a look at, to see if they can make any sort of growth. I'm just looking at the past coaches for the Houston Texans since Bill O'Brien was let go in 2020. Totally forgot Romeo Crennel was in there for a time. And then David Culley. And then
David Culley was the man that I was missing.
That's right. And then Lovie Smith, and then DeMeco Ryans. So hopefully they get a little bit more of some long-term stability there with DeMeco Ryans in as the new head coach. Anything else on the NFL firing side that you wanted to touch on quickly? I know we kind of went through it on previous episodes of the show. Some different hirings going on, but is there any like interviews that kind of stood out to you around the NFL of guys that kind of stood out, or do you want to move on?
A couple that do, and I'll circle back to the Bucs because we didn't touch on them after they fired Todd Bowles, but Todd Bowles has been linked to maybe getting another job somewhere else. But the Brady factor, when they were doing the interviews, apparently the Brady factor was a huge part of it. Where, all right, how are you going to game plan for it? Tom Brady's here, and how are you going to game plan Tom Brady's not here? And Todd Monken is making $2 million as a offensive coordinator for the Georgia Bulldogs right now, highest paid offensive coordinator in college football. The Buccaneers to open up their wallets here, but I'm curious to see if that is a guy who now wants to join a team that I don't know. They have Kyle Trask there, who was a second-round pick out of Florida, hasn't had many reps. I'm curious to see if maybe this kind of rubs him away. And he's like, you know what? I got it all made here. I just want, I'm doing good. I just want back-to-back national championships in Georgia. Curious to see how that affects maybe the Buccaneers hiring an offensive coordinator right now, because Todd Bowles, I'm surprised he wasn't fired. I get that they gave him another opportunity to kind of redeem themselves this year by hiring his own coaching staff, because Bruce Arians left late in March last year and he adopted this coaching staff. There was a lot of, I guess, I don't want to say turmoil, but there was a lot of unpleasant stuff happening in Tampa. It sounds like between Todd Bowles and the way plays were calling and the coaching staff, seems like there was a real divide there. So curious how that one is affected. Also want to make sure we touch on Eric Bieniemy, offensive coordinator for the Kansas City Chiefs, that hasn't had as many head coaching opportunities or interviews as I think should get them. He constantly gets overlooked, and I'm curious to see if anything happens in the next few weeks after the Super Bowl. There hasn't been a lot of rumors or rumblings about him, though, but a little disappointing to see once again his name get overpassed for. And you know what? I'll bring up a guy like DeMeco Ryans, because I'm not here to say deserve, because, deserve has nothing to do with it. Thanks, Clint Eastwood. But at the same time, it does kind of bother me that we're starting to see, and, Jeff Saturday, we saw it as well with the Colts and how they're kind of still figuring things out. But at the same time, it's like how all of these coaches and young coaches that are putting in time, coaches that deserve head coaching opportunities, that aren't really getting them. And we're starting to see a lot more of these. All right, well, he's young and has this offensive mind, his creativity, and we're going to see how things go. And, we look at what happened in Denver, and Nathaniel Hackett, though, he was right there, as part of the Green Bay Packers coaching staff, but then he never called plays in Green Bay. So it's like, all right, I guess you're going to hire this guy, and look what happened. He didn't. He was a fish out of water. So that's where, like I said, I bring up the DeMeco Ryans situation, because this guy was relatively new to coaching. Now, who's he going to hire on his offensive side? Who's he going to hire? Is there going to be a veteran kind of coaching sense that gets brought in here to kind of help that situation out? And like I said, I think Eric Bieniemy is a guy too that I think he deserves a head coaching position. I know that people point to how he had issues back when he was a coach in Colorado and the NCAA. I don't care. We've seen so much happen in the NFL over the last few years where people are making mistakes and getting into trouble off the field, and they're still getting opportunities. Eric Bieniemy needs a head coaching position, and if it doesn't happen very soon, I'm going to be a little surprised. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
I remember reading somewhere that Bieniemy was linked to maybe the Washington Commanders as an offensive coordinator thing there. I wonder if him getting an opportunity to actually call the plays for an offense will help open up some more gigs for him, because I wonder if that's the one thing that's kind of holding him back, being under an Andy Reid offense. But I don't disagree with you, just for the record. I just wonder if that's sort of the mindset of some of these franchises trying to see a little bit more of the play calling side of things. And so if an opportunity opens up in Washington where he gets to call the plays and actually make the decisions, I wonder if that kind of opens up some potential opportunities for him down the road. But nonetheless, some interesting prospects there. Just to quickly start to wrap things up, let's quickly go over some of the conference championship games that happened. We're going to take our Super Bowl preview for next week. We're going to do a big panel show. That's the plan. So get excited for that. So we're just going to focus on the conference championships for this week. We'll quickly talk about the Eagles and Niners game, mainly because this was pretty much a dominant performance from the Eagles start to finish, and it's made rougher for the 49ers when it comes to, losing both your quarterbacks on the depth chart during the game. One who looks like will require Tommy John surgery, and then Josh Johnson.
Yep, former Buccaneer.
Former Buccaneer. Well, he's practically played for every franchise. You could name off a team in the NFL he probably played for them. But Josh Johnson coming in, he also gets injured. They have to throw Purdy back in there, not to be able to throw, but to be able to hand the ball off to Christian McCaffrey. McCaffrey tries to attempt to throw this game. Just kind of the embodiment of the San Francisco 49ers, not only this year, but really the last couple of years. They're just a walking infirmary. To steal a line from a good listener, Jonathan Skuse, on this, the 49 and 49ers represents the amount of players injured on this squad, because it is just a walking infirmary out there for the Niners. A very talented team, but just injuries continue to bother them, and not able to come out of the gate against the Eagles.
Yeah, tough couple of years since they were in the Super Bowl against the Kansas City Chiefs, and Jimmy Garoppolo misses a wide open touchdown late in the game. Chiefs will then end up winning it. And ever since then, it feels like you said they've been injured with 49 players every season. And, the one year where they do get healthy and they have such a great squad, they end up dealing with the biggest injury you can deal with. And it's at quarterback multiple times this year. Trey Lance, very tough injury to deal with when he was on the field. Then you get to Jimmy Garoppolo and you see him. And I saw during the NFC Championship game that people were ripping on him because he was smiling on the sidelines, just kind of chilling. But the fact that they lost 3 quarterbacks and then one to, like you said, Tommy John, like a torn UCL in his elbow, yet then here comes Josh Johnson, then lost to a concussion, basically, and he gets taken off the field. You have to then put that quarterback in there who has a very terrible elbow and can't throw the ball. It's very unfortunate for them. The Eagles didn't have a great offensive game either. I thought Jalen Hurts was very pedestrian, missed some wide open throws. The argue catch on Devontae Smith that wasn't a catch, that, is this catch because it was called a catch on the field and it was not overturned. You go back and you look at that game and it was a very much, I think, that one botched snap from Josh Johnson where it just missed them and they were still right there in the game. I think that completely altered everything, but then the injuries to the quarterbacks kind of dealt not very good cards for that 49ers team toward late in the game. That's a team where, and you look at already hearing Kyle Shanahan say that he doesn't see any scenario which Jimmy Garoppolo comes back. I don't believe that you'll have Brock Purdy back in time ready to sling the ball, and Trey Lance is someone that you're hopeful to come back. So they have a lot of big cap hits. Trent Williams, I think, has also been rumored to maybe want to retire. That's a team I look at. It just seems to be flat out cursed over the last couple of years. Tough. I am rooting for the Eagles in the Super Bowl. I like a lot of that defense. Offensively, I still have some questions because it didn't look like they were totally in sync against the 49ers. And I know that they're a good defense and all, but you look at that one play too of Brock Purdy getting hit. It was just that one snap second of not being able to get a wide open Brandon Ayuk looking like for a touchdown. And it was just the fact that we had the defender get there first. Hassan Reddick got there and hit his elbow just in time, and that's how quickly football can change things. So for the Eagles, that's a team that has a really good offensive line, but their offense wasn't clicking, and what we've seen from the Chiefs, man, that team is looking good.
Yeah, totally, absolutely. And the Cowboys fan in me, the Cowboys fan in me wants to be like, yeah, the Eagles, this has been a cakewalk for them. They beat the Giants and they beat the injury-riddled 49ers, not even their first-string quarterback, and this is how they get into the Super Bowl. That part of me wants to seep in and say that, but this is a solid Eagles squad, and I've been saying it all year, again, begrudgingly and puking at the end of this of podcast recordings, praising the Eagles, but they are a very solid team. And I think, again, in the case of the 49ers, like you mentioned, it just seems like they're cursed. Like they just cannot get out of this injury bug that just continues to plague them year after year. And even with an injury bug, they're still able to get to an NFC championship. One year they go to a Super Bowl. I just wonder with a lot of these teams what it would be like if they were at full strength. You got to see everybody play at full strength. And then you mentioned the quarterback situation. I think that helps save Trey Lance in this scenario. I think we're going to get another year of Trey Lance. We'll see how he does. Obviously, Purdy may not be able to play this season at all. And as you mentioned, Jimmy G, looks like they're going to move on from him. I see him as a Raider, just for the record. But nonetheless, that's going to be interesting to see how the 49ers do, if they could continue to try and be a consistently very good football team. And on the AFC side, we looked at the Chiefs and the Bengals, and a lot of trash talk coming from the Bengals. Burrowhead, Eli Apple, of course, talking a lot of trash as well. And unfortunately, kind of like his name, he's Apple Crisp, because he was also burned that game as well. It was it was back and forth. It came down to the final field goal. Reffing was horrible this game. It was really, really bad. I try to avoid the NFL is rigged or anything like that, because that's a little silly. And I try to avoid blaming the refs on stuff. And I still think in the case of the Bengals, they shot themselves in the foot a lot of times in this game, but they certainly, the Chiefs certainly got some help in this game from some really bad reffing coming from this game. Your thoughts quickly on the AFC Championship?
Yeah, unfortunate. I'm a Brady fan. I'm a Bucs fan, but I've been on the Burrow wagon, and I loved the fact that he was so confident heading into that game. But I did think that the Bengals social media, the Cincinnati mayor, everybody was a little too much on the Burrowhead. The fact that he was 3-0 against Mahomes, and there was so much being put on. It's like there was a lot of cockiness involved in that situation, and it was like, all right, heading into it, the Bengals had chances to win that game. They had a lot of chances late in the game. They battled back a lot, and Joe Burrow stepped up. Like you said, it was very unfortunate that you come away from games like that, and the refs are so heavily criticized because of all that stuff that happens, and what gets missed, and the human error. But at the same time, it's like, I hate when you can come away from such an important game like that. When if you told me that it's going to be Bengals versus Chiefs in the AFC Championship game for the next 5 years, you're probably right. Like, they're both just such good quarterbacks in Burrow and Mahomes. You love seeing that, and I was happy to see that we had a much closer game than we did when the Eagles and the 49ers earlier in the day. But Patty Mahomes, man, getting that ball, that game, getting that run in on fourth down. The penalty was just idiotic, and I know people were very upset, and I think it was Joseph Asai who was the one that ended up pushing Mahomes when he was out of bounds, and people were upset saying, you made a mistake. It's like, yeah, I don't care if you make a mistake. That literally cost you a Super Bowl ticket right there. Like, it is what it is. You can't take that kind of a penalty. You can't do that kind of stuff. You can't push anybody when they're out of bounds, let alone Patty Mahomes, let alone the way the refs were already playing that game. There was no way that was a bad call by the refs. That was a very terrible call, and I saw Bengals players trying to stick up for him. And now I get it. Joseph Asai is going to have to sit there all offseason, and no matter how this Super Bowl plays out, he cost them. Like, it was him.
Yep.
It was him. That's it. So for me, I look at the situation of, hey, dude, like, it was him, tough. But Patty Mahomes balled out when it mattered on one ankle. He got that run in on third down to make it first down. They got the penalty to get it in kicking range, and it was game over. The Chiefs, I'm very high on the way that they've been playing. Their defense is a bit skeptical, but they've been playing really good last few games. They lost Lenarius Sneed in that game early, one of their top corners. So here's to see what happens for the Super Bowl. But full credit to the Chiefs on winning that game when it mattered.
Yeah, 100%. And as you mentioned on that defense, a lot of rookies on that defense, and they played well in that game. But something to certainly keep an eye on heading into the Super Bowl. And we're going to save some of our Super Bowl preview for next week.
You're teasing everyone.
I know. Look, I got to find a way to fill a week of content with no Super Bowl coming up this Sunday. I gotta wait. I gotta keep enticing the listeners. So we're gonna.
You know what you can do?
Oh, what?
You can go back and you can watch Travis Kelce post game doing his best rock impression to the Cincinnati mayor.
That's right.
You shut your mouth and know your role. Loved it. That was great. This is Wrestling Reference to end the show, friggin'.
I love it. I'm glad you brought that up.
Kelce versus Kelce in the Super Bowl.
Is that really happening? Oh, yeah. I wish they would bring that up.
I haven't heard it, have you?
I know, not at all. I wish they brought that up. I wish
also, Andy Reid used to coach the Eagles.
Wait a minute. Really? Wow. Oh, my God. Wow, they better bring that up in the Super Bowl. Otherwise, I will feel completely lost when I was watching that game. So we'll save the Super Bowl preview for next week. So stay tuned for that. I'm sure you'll be tuning in for the Pro Bowl, Mr. Bunda. A lot of great skills competitions going on.
Tell me about it. I'm currently taping the dodgeball game. It looks really intense, and the longest drive.
Oh yeah, not the movie Dodgeball, the actual dodgeball game.
Yeah, that movie's terrible. Why would I want to watch that?
Oh, of course not.
I want to watch NFL players play dodgeball, right?
Yeah, of course. That's what the people want to see. That's what the people pay money to see.
I love dodgeball. I'm kidding.
I was just going to say, I didn't know if that was real or not. Time's running out on us, and I didn't know if I could be ready to unleash on with that dodgeball take. But good. I'm glad you like dodgeball. It's a very good movie. But it's we'll see what we'll do for the Pro Bowl. I was thinking of maybe try and do something fun. Maybe do some sort of Twitter space or something on Sunday. We'll see. But nonetheless, I could definitely guarantee we're going to get a Super Bowl preview next week. So stay tuned for that. I'll, of course, continue to listen to This Is Wrestling every week. Vote for us.
Listen to my podcast. Thank you.
Of course, that's right. 2023 Ottawa Awards from Faces Magazine. Continue to vote for us for Best Sports Podcast each week up until February 15th, I believe, is the cutoff date. So continue to vote for us there. But thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We'll be back next week with a full Super Bowl preview. This should be fun.